Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. It is just after 10 p.m. in New Delhi, 7:30 in the evening in Beirut, and half past noon in New York City. And you're watching a special broadcast here on DD India. Now, over the next 2 hours, we'll get you the latest on India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the US, his first after winning a third consecutive term in office. I'll be joined momentarily by DD India's correspondent on the ground in the US. Also joining us would be an eminent panel of guests who will break it all down for you so that you, the viewer, have a better understanding of the issues at hand. Now, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived at the Philadelphia International Airport on Saturday on the first day of his three-day visit to the United States. Philadelphia was the site of the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. Members of the Indian diaspora gathered at the Philadelphia International Airport. They gave a warm welcome to him on his arrival. Now, Prime Minister Modi interacted with the Indian diaspora at the airport. A meeting with his host, President Joe Biden, is the first item on his itinerary. Next, the Prime Minister will attend a Quad summit at Wilmington in the state of Delaware. He will interact there with the Australian and Japanese leaders along with President Biden on pressing global issues such as the Indo-Pacific and the conflicts in Ukraine and West Asia. Prime Minister Modi arrived at Hotel Dupont in the heart of downtown Wilmington, Delaware. The Indian diaspora from different U.S. cities gathered at the hotel to welcome him. The Prime Minister met members of the Indian community at the hotel as well as where they gathered to welcome him. He also witnessed performances by members of the Indian diaspora at the hotel. Earlier upon his arrival in Philadelphia, Prime Minister Modi took to the micro-blogging site X and said, and I quote him here, "Landed in Philadelphia, today's program will be focused on the Quad summit and the bilateral meeting with President Joe Biden. I'm sure the discussions throughout the day will contribute to making our planet better and addressing key global challenges." In another message on X, the Prime Minister wrote, and I quote again, "The Indian community has distinguished itself in the USA, making a positive impact across diverse sectors. It's always a delight to interact with them." At around 9:30 p.m. India time on Sunday, 22nd September, I'll address the Modi and US program in New York City. Let's celebrate the bonds that connect our nations, unquote. Now, the Indian diaspora is buzzing with excitement over Prime Minister Modi's visit. They gathered near the Philadelphia International Airport and Hotel Dupont in Wilmington, Delaware to welcome him. Modi, 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 Modi.
It's our distinct pleasure to welcome our Prime Minister, Bharat's Prime Minister here. America is our Karma Bhumi and India is our Dharma Bhumi. And to welcome the ambassador of the Dharma Bhumi to our country, to our country, America, is our distinct privilege.
I want to bridge the gap between the the youth, and all the association leaders here, and that's why we all students are here. What I feel is that there is a big generation gap between parents, grandparents, and us. But when I see Modi ji, he is very different. He understands each diaspora, each generation, and we expect him much more from him.
I'm very proud to be from the home state of Gujarat, where Prime Minister Modi ji had stayed, and it is very pride for us that we are representing the international community. And from the healthcare side, Modi ji has done so many, like he has maintained the relations, and we are proud to be here supporting Modi ji.
And joining us from Wilmington in the US state of Delaware is my colleague Amritpal Singh. Amrit, walk us through Prime Minister Modi's engagements over the next several hours.
Okay, as you just said, that the Prime Minister landed at the Philadelphia airport, which is about a half an hour drive from Wilmington. Though Philadelphia is in another state called Pennsylvania, he drove down to Wilmington here in Delaware, where he interacted with the Indian community very briefly. They performed dances, garba. He's now on his way to a meeting with President Joe Biden of the United States. President Biden belongs to Delaware. He grew up here. He has a home here at Wilmington, and he's invited Prime Minister Modi at his home, at his personal home. So it's an hour-long bilateral meeting where the two leaders will review the bilateral relationship. There's a comprehensive strategic partnership between the two countries, a pretty diverse relationship in diverse fields that shall come up for review. Then he goes to Archmere Academy. That is the school where President Biden's children, President Biden's grandchildren studied here in on the suburbs of Wilmington. It's called a place called Claymont. So in that school, President Biden is hosting all the three visiting leaders. That's Narendra Modi, Fumio Kishida, the Japanese Prime Minister, and Anthony Albanese, the Australian Prime Minister, where they will go in for a fourth in-person Quad Leaders Summit that shall, of course, review the progress made in Quad in the past 1 year, set out the agenda for the coming year, and also look at announcing initiatives, expanding the initiatives in various fields like maritime domain awareness, cooperation between the coast guards of countries, etc., and also looking at how linkages can be formed that can lead to development of the countries of the region, not just these four countries, but other countries in the Indo-Pacific region, and of course strengthening this Indo-Pacific region, making it a secure place. He will also briefly meet Prime Minister Kishida and Prime Minister Albanese separately, and there is a small event called the Cancer Moonshot event, where the four leaders shall be speaking. Cancer Moonshot event, as Ramesh you would know, is a project that's very close to President Biden's heart, so there could be some announcements of how the Quad countries could work together to battle the scourge of cancer. Ramesh?
Amrit, you spoke about Joe Biden's private home in Delaware and the school he went to as well. Let's address those two venues one by one. First, to his private home, Amrit. Why do you think Biden chose his hometown to host the Quad Summit? What are the thoughts that might have gone into it?
I think President Biden wanted to add a personal touch to the Quad. He could have held it in Washington, D.C., his official home, but he chose to keep it at his personal home and invite Prime Minister Modi. That, of course, speaks about the relationship between the two leaders, but also is reflective of the close relationship and the growing relationship which is strengthening by the day, by the years between the two countries. As you know, this is President Biden hangs his spur at the end of this year. Since he pulled out of the race of the US presidential election. So it's clear that he ends his term and steps down after that once it's over. But it does speak about, whatever party comes to power, the India-US relationship is growing. So I think President Biden chose his home and also the school in a way to send a message to the Quad countries that this is a very personal relationship, and also I think he would want to leave a legacy behind as he demits office of leading the United States, strengthening its relations and forming meaningful linkages with countries across the world. Ramesh.
Amrit, you also visited the high school where Joe Biden studied as a young boy. What was that like? What did the students there have to say about the fact that the US president chose his own hometown to host the Quad Summit?
Oh yes, I was there. I spent a couple of hours there, and there were children playing. There was a rugby match going, so there was visible excitement. So when I spoke to a few students, I had sent that report also, where they said, one, they are generally very proud that they go to the same school that the President of the United States went to. But now, given the fact that world leaders of important countries like Australia, India, Japan, and grouping as relevant and important or significant as Quad, these leaders are holding the Quad Summit in their school. They say it's a matter of honor, and it's a matter. One of the children told me it's a matter of students told me it's a matter of national pride and a personal pride for him. So there was visible excitement. Of course, the school is shut for children today, the students today, because of the security of these leaders, and that's one thing that they were craving about. They said the school should have allowed them in, and so that they could see the leaders, but in any case, but they were very happy that their school is the venue of the Quad Leaders Summit. Ramesh.
Amrit, that was all about the optics of the summit and the visit itself. Let's now turn attention to the substantive part of their talks in the US. Amrit, what should one expect from the Modi-Biden bilateral meeting in terms of outcomes?
Ramesh, your voice broke. Could you please repeat your question?
Can you hear me
again?
now? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you very clearly now.
So, Amrit, we discussed about the optics of the summit and the talks in the US. Let's now turn our attention to the substantive part of their talks there. What should one expect, in terms of outcomes from the Modi-Biden bilateral talks?
Okay, first the Modi bilateral Biden talks. The bilateral is essentially to take review of the partnership and work out, how the partnership can be deepened in areas of trade, of defense ties, of the Indian talent pool working here in the United States, and how they could also discuss the international conflict, especially the Ukraine conflict, given that their Prime Minister Modi had made certain suggestions. He spoke to both sides. He had visited Russia, spoken to President Putin, also later visited Ukraine, spoke to President Zelensky. So the two sides could discuss that how a meaningful effort can be made to resolve this conflict, and if there is a scope of mediation in whatever form the two countries want or the two blocs want, India could play a constructive role. So I think that would be of paramount importance, given that in the Middle East or in West Asia, the crisis is deepening. The two sides could discuss what is the way forward to resolve that conflict, and as I said, look at aspects of the bilateral relationship. But the Foreign Secretary is briefing reporters here by the end of the day, so we'll know once the talks finish as to what agreements were made, what points were agreed upon. I don't think there are any formal agreements, because let's be realistic, President Biden hangs his purse, so he's in the sort of last days of his presidency. So at this stage, some concrete agreements between the two sides may not, but yes, to give continuity to the relationship, the whole gamut of the bilateral ties will come up for discussion, apart from the other international issues that I mentioned.
Indeed, Amrit, and you've covered India-US ties for the longest time I've known. So how would you describe the current state of play in the bilateral relations in terms of, one, defense and security, in terms of people-to-people ties, trade and investment, and last but not the least, the ICET, the Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies? I ask you this because semiconductors are very much in the news.
Absolutely. ICET is the new area where the two sides are putting focus. India has been giving a push to semiconductor, given its huge talent pool, given its manufacturing base, and given that US is one of the biggest consumers of semiconductors. So the two sides would want to look at cooperation in that. And as technology changes, as semiconductors increasingly play an important role in touching our lives in every way, as technology becomes an essential part of everyday life of humanity, of humans. This would be a key focus area when the two leaders sit and talk. The two sides have been working on that. In fact, then again, okay, the defense relationship, maritime cooperation between the two sides, cooperation in the domain of defense equipment, joint manufacturing. The US companies are interested in investing in India. I'm talking about in the defense sector as India opens up its defense manufacturing base. So the two sides would be reviewing that and seeing that how that can be deepened. In fact, he's holding a meeting with the CEOs. It's called the CEO Roundtable. So he'll be interacting with the businesses, heads of businesses here in US, some very important companies, also some big names as well, looking at how a push can be given for investment into India and manufacturing by US companies collaborating with the Indian manufacturers. Ramesh.
Amrit, so we've covered the bilateral component or dimension of the India-US relationship, especially in light of the Prime Minister's ongoing visit to the US. Let me also ask you of the multilateral aspects of the visit in terms of, one, his other bilaterals with the leaders of the other Quad members, namely Japan and Australia. This is Prime Minister Kishida's farewell visit of sorts, because he'll be stepping down very soon, we are told.
Yes, he'll be interacting after his meeting with President Biden. The President Biden's home is about 20-25 minutes away from where he studied, the Archmere Academy. So he drives down to the Archmere Academy, the venue of the Quad Leaders Summit, where he'll briefly interact with Prime Minister Kishida and Prime Minister Albanese before the leaders go in for the Quad Leaders Summit in the afternoon. Of course, they'll review the bilateral relationship there, but those are smaller meetings with the prime ministers. The meeting with the US president is a longer one. Then they go in for the Quad Leaders Summit. Now, coming to the multilateral aspect of it, they'll be reviewing the progress made in Quad in the past 1 year. They'll also be looking at how the Quad could strengthen its ties. There are interesting statements coming out of the White House. John Kirby, the White House spokesperson, made it clear that they are not looking at it as a military alliance, but it's a grouping, because India had sensitivities on it being seen or it developing as a military alliance. India has been clear right from the beginning that it does not see itself as a NATO kind of grouping in the Indo-Pacific, though securing the Indo-Pacific is an important part, but that could be achieved through maritime exercises between countries. But India does not see it as a military alliance, and I think the other Quad partners are on board on that, and John Kirby's statement clears the air on that, the Americans also look at Quad as that. From an Indian standpoint, I think the Indian Prime Minister, when he addresses the other leaders, would be giving a push for strengthening linkages amongst these countries that lead to meeting the developmental goals and aspirations of the countries of the region. They would also look at increasing cooperation, say, in maritime domain awareness, looking at how environmental impact can be taken care of, clean energy, extending the ambit of the Indo-Pacific right up to the Indian Ocean region. Some maritime exercises between the coast guards of the two countries could be announced at the Quad Summit. Also, Ramesh, that financing of developmental initiatives in these areas, apart from disaster resilience, would be what the leaders will be talking at the Quad Leaders Summit.
All right, we leave it there. Amrit, thank you for that comprehensive overview of India-US ties and also the Quad Summit. We'll keep coming back to you for more as we go along, but thank you for now. Appreciate it. Amrit Pal Singh reporting there from Wilmington, Delaware on the developments there. All right, let me now take a moment to preview the Indian leader's visit for you. Now, Prime Minister Modi is in the US for one. As Amrit was mentioning, they're attending the Quad Summit and holding bilateral talks with President Biden and others. Two, addressing the Indian diaspora and business leaders, and also taking part in the Summit of the Future at the UN. Now, Biden is hosting the 2024 Quad Summit at his hometown of Wilmington. Wilmington in the state of Delaware is Prime Minister Modi's first stop on his three-day visit to the US. DD India's Amrit Pal Singh sent us this report.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives here in the United States on a three-day visit. He will hold a bilateral meeting with US President Joe Biden, followed by bilateral meetings with his Japanese and Australian counterparts Fumio Kishida and Anthony Albanese. Prime Minister later will participate in the Quad Leaders Summit here. Delaware, in fact, is the home state of President Biden. It's a state where President grew up. In fact, President Biden has chosen this school called Archmere Academy, which is a private school on the suburbs of Wilmington, where President Biden studied.
This is really awesome because this is where President Biden studied, and now such a big thing is happening here. So I'm really excited for what's going to happen.
It's a big honor. It's like really a big deal to be at the same school that the President of the United States of America went to.
It gives me a lot of pride and honor that my school is chosen.
The fourth in-person Quad Summit will review the progress achieved by the grouping over the past 1 year and set the agenda for the year ahead to assist the countries in the Indo-Pacific to meet their developmental goals and aspirations. They will also be looking at areas of cooperation in areas like maritime security, high-quality infrastructure, critical and emerging technologies, cyber security, health security, natural disaster response, and climate and clean energy. The leaders will also be addressing a small event called the Cancer Moonshot event here, where they'll be speaking about what their respective governments have done in their terms to deal with the scourge of cancer. In fact, President Biden is hosting this meeting here in his school to give it a personal touch, as this will be his last meeting, in fact, both for him and for Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, as they are hanging their spurs later this year. With cameraman Kuldeep Sharma, this is Amrit Pal Singh for DD India in Wilmington, Delaware.
All right, time to bring in my guests on this special broadcast. Joining me is Dr. Mohan Kumar. Dr. Kumar is a former Indian ambassador to France and Bahrain. He joins us from the New Delhi suburb of Greater Noida. Also joining us from Greater Noida is Professor Harshvardhan Pant. Professor Pant is Vice President Studies and Foreign Policy at the Observer Research Foundation. The ORF is a privately held think tank headquartered in New Delhi. And Ambassador Meera Shankar joins us from New Delhi. Ambassador Shankar is a former Indian ambassador to the US and Germany. Also joining us later on the program will be Mr. Atul Aneja. He is a journalist. He'll be joining us from the New Delhi suburb of Gurugram. Ambassadors and Professor Pant, welcome to this special broadcast. Ambassador Shankar, if I can start with you, why don't I begin by asking you to give our viewers a quick overview of India-US ties?
Well, the strategic relationship between India and the United States has had bilateral consensus in the US and has been built up across Republican and Democratic administrations.
Right.
Under President Biden, it has become more substantive and institutionalized. We have seen certain new areas of cooperation, such as in critical and emerging technologies, including semiconductors, artificial intelligence, advanced telecommunications, space, quantum computing, These are initiatives which will need nurturing by both governments to actually, build a relationship across these areas in practical terms. Secondly, I think the other new aspect has been the agreement for co-production of defense equipment, the GE 414 engine, which will now power the Tejas Mark II and will be built in India in a partnership between GE and HAL. And of course, defense ties have continued to be robust. Further aspect has been the upgrading of Quad to summit level, and the Quad itself being given more substance in terms of its utility as an organization in the Indo-Pacific. Its primary purpose is to have an open and inclusive Indo-Pacific anchored in the rule of law.
Right.
But for this purpose, they have looked, it's not a defense grouping, but they have looked at a range of areas. And the meeting that Prime Minister Modi is going to have during the Quad Summit is likely to expand the initiative on maritime domain awareness into the Indian Ocean, with India joining it. And so now there will be a more comprehensive maritime domain awareness initiative, and the coast guards of these four countries are expected to step up cooperation in this area. It will look again at, humanitarian disaster relief and preparedness, and the other aspects of building robust infrastructure. And finally, this cancer initiative, which really is focusing on cervical cancer, which is entirely preventable, where there is now a vaccine. And so possibly they will look at, jointly rolling out a program for, trying to deal in a preventive way with this scourge, which is entirely preventable.
Right.
President Biden and Prime Minister Modi will take stock of the entire bilateral relationship and see, where more attention needs to be paid. And the Quad itself will, in a sense, be taking stock of Biden's legacy, because he's devoted a lot of personal capital in building up this organization, and also deciding on what could be programs for the next year, so that there is a direction for the future. They'll also be bidding farewell to the Prime Minister of Japan, Kishida, and and President Biden himself is stepping down after election. So in a sense, it's a moment to take stock and to set directions for the future.
Absolutely, a time for reflection also perhaps. Ambassador Kumar, coming to you now, how would you describe the state of play in the India-US ties? Are you personally satisfied with the trajectory of the relationship?
I think, thank you, Ramesh, for having me. I think you would have to say it is the most consequential strategic partnership. I think we have about 25 to 30 strategic partnerships. I think it's important to understand what each country gets out of it.
Right.
I think from an Indian perspective, I think the US relationship is important because we need to have access to technology, the defense ties, just the Indian diaspora that is there in the US, health, climate change, etc. From the US perspective, I think they still see us as a counterweight to China. But be that as it may, I think one of the strong reasons for this visit is that firstly, I think there is bipartisan consensus in the United States. Secondly, I think the attempt from India is to lock in the relationship so that it doesn't matter who becomes president next. A lot of things are happening and a lot of things will continue to happen. So the idea is to lock in as many things as possible in the strategic partnership. Specifically, I would say that our joining the Indo-Pacific economic framework will be an important thing for me, from my perspective, in the bilateral relationship. The multi-billion-dollar order for drones is still hanging fire. I hope there will be progress. I hope also there will be something on the Indo-US drugs framework. We've had a long-standing relationship on pharmaceuticals and generic pharmaceuticals, so there could be some progress on it. On the whole, to answer your question quite frankly, substantively, I think the relationship is in good shape. But this is not to say that there are no differences. I think you read reports that the White House has hosted a meeting of people who apparently, are articulating the Khalistani movement and so on. That is an issue that we will have to talk about and deal with, Ramesh. So I don't want to kind of say that everything is hunky-dory, but it is the most consequential strategic partnership we have without a doubt. Several things, as Ambassador Shankar said, are on the anvil, and I think they will make substantive progress. But I think there are some differences as well, which we need to tackle at the level of the Prime Minister and the President.
Fair enough. Point taken, Ambassador Kumar. Professor Pant, both ambassadors, Ambassador Shankar and Ambassador Kumar, have spoken on the bilateral dimension of the relationship. I want you to weigh in on the big picture obtaining insofar as my next question to you is concerned. Do you think Prime Minister Modi and President Biden will take the opportunity of this in-person meeting to exchange views on the Ukraine-Russia conflict? Prime Minister Modi has met both President Putin and President Zelensky. In other words, is India able and willing to bring Ukraine and Russia to the negotiating table?
Well, thanks, Ramesh. I think certainly, if you look at India's role in the last, what India has tried to do in the last few months, and what the Prime Minister himself has tried to do in the last few months, both engaging both Ukraine and Russia, that I think underscores India's commitment to continue to play a constructive role in a conflict that is ravaging not only the two main protagonists, but also a large part of the global South. So I think in that sense, it is important. It has been an important part of Prime Minister Modi's diplomacy over the last few months to ensure that the channels of communication remain open. I don't think that at this point the question of formal mediation is on the table, because both sides seem to be more intent on fighting. But certainly exchanging views with the Biden administration, with the president himself, to lay out, I think, in some ways, what both sides are thinking and how they are looking at the conflict. Because let's also remember that the West really has no substantive contact with Russia at the moment. So India remains the only country that has access to Russian leadership, that has access to views from the top level. And I think Prime Minister has really gone directly to both President Zelensky and President Putin and taken a measure of the situation. So one would hope and one expects that issue certainly would come up, and there is no way that issue can be avoided under the present circumstances. So certainly that engagement, as far as India is concerned, will be part of the agenda, and sharing views on global conflicts. I think both Ukraine as well as what is happening in the Middle East will continue to frame not only the Quad's agenda in some ways, but also bilateral agendas here, we are at a very critical moment in global security. And these issues cannot really be avoided, whether it is a platform like Quad or whether it is bilateral engagement between some of the key players on the global stage. So I think as India takes on greater responsibility, it is amply evident that this issue will be discussed, and India has done some groundwork in the last few months in terms of assessing both Ukrainian position and Russian position on a first-hand basis. And certainly that will be shared not only with President Biden, but also with other leaders around the table. But I do think that this issue will be front and center in so many ways. Although Quad is an Indo-Pacific platform, although Quad doesn't really directly deal with the issue at hand, Russia-Ukraine conflict, but there is no denying also from that reality that the conflict continues to hang over. Not only, I think, in some ways what is happening in global politics, but also in some ways President Biden's legacy. And I think India certainly would like to do whatever it can to ensure that the views, I think, from both sides that it has gathered are put across to President Biden as well.
All right, so we've heard opening remarks from all three of my guests, Ambassador Shankar, Ambassador Kumar and Professor Pant. I want you to stay on. Let me take a moment to also bring our viewers up to speed with some more news that we are packing on in this broadcast. Now, in 1993, viewers, the US State Department and the American Council of Young Political Leaders invited a young Indian politician to a special program starting from Washington, D.C. Now, starting on the 10th of July in 1993, Narendra Modi, then a BJP Gujarat worker, set out on a learning expedition to the US. Now, this visit, which took place between the 10th of July and the 23rd of July, included a series of meetings set up by the US State Department with political leaders, senior administrative officials, American policymakers and representatives from the trade and industry. Now, during that visit, Narendra Modi gained extensive exposure through discussions about American politics, foreign policy and other matters with prominent lawmakers, governors and mayors as well. Now, in Houston, Prime Minister Modi got the opportunity to tour the Houston Medical Center, which is one of the largest in the world, and he made a special visit to the U.S. Space Agency NASA's facilities at the Space Center there. During this visit, he also gained exposure to the country's political ideologies and legislative structure. He interacted with various local trade, commerce and economic development authorities as well. Now, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived in the US and he is set to attend the Quad Summit with President Joe Biden and the others. Here's a quick report.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who's arrived in the United States for a 3-day visit, will attend the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue Leadership Summit hosted by American President Joe Biden. Quad is a group of procedural democracies comprising the United States of America, Japan, India and Australia. The 2024 Quad Summit will be held at US President Joe Biden's hometown of Delaware on Saturday. The summit will be US President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's last Quad meeting, as neither leader will contest the upcoming elections in their respective countries. The Quad Summit is likely to focus on boosting cooperation among the member nations in the Indo-Pacific, besides delving into various key challenges facing the globe, including the conflict in Ukraine. In July 2024, the foreign ministers of the Quad member nations held wide-ranging talks in Tokyo with a focus on boosting overall cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. In a message to China, the Quad foreign ministerial meeting reaffirmed the grouping's steadfast commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific and also resolved to work towards a region where no country dominates others and each state is free from coercion in all its forms. The foreign minister also announced a plan to expand its ambitions in the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Program to the Indian Ocean region that would facilitate monitoring the strategic waters. Now let's understand why Quad matters. Quad countries are home to a combined 1.9 billion people, or 24% of the world's population, and represent 35% of the world's GDP and 18% of global trade. The motive behind the Quad is to keep the strategic sea routes in the Indo-Pacific free of any military or political influence. It is basically seen as a strategic grouping to reduce Chinese domination. The core objectives of the Quad is to secure a rules-based global order, freedom of navigation, and a liberal trading system. The coalition also aims to offer alternate debt financing for nations in the Indo-Pacific. The Quad leaders exchange views on contemporary global issues such as critical and emerging technologies, connectivity and infrastructure, cybersecurity, maritime security, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, climate change, pandemic, and education. In the years 2021 to 2024, annual Quad Leaders Summit have provided high-level guidance through their joint statement on shared goals and principles. In 2021, Prime Minister Modi participated in the first in-person Quad Leaders Summit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that the agenda of the summit, including COVID-19 vaccine initiative and climate change, make it a force for global good. The Prime Minister said that the four nations attending the summit, India, the US, Australia and Japan, are joined by sharing democratic values and commitment to a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. Quad has come of age and will remain an important pillar of stability in the Indo-Pacific region. Bureau Report, DD India.
All right, let me go back to my guests, Ambassador Meera Shankar, Ambassador Mohan Kumar and Professor Harshvardhan Pant for joining us on this broadcast. Ambassador Shankar, if I can come back to you, how do you view the evolution of the Quad over the years?
Well, it had a very tentative beginning because at that time, countries were still kind of confused about whether they saw China as an opportunity or a strategic competitor. And since then, so it was formed and then eventually it became dormant because of Chinese objections. But it was revived under President Trump and then elevated.
All right, Ambassador Kumar, I hate to interrupt you there. We are getting the latest pictures from Wilmington, Delaware, of the Indian Prime Minister making his way to his bilateral with President Joe Biden of the US. We'll play out those visuals for you momentarily. We're getting these visuals of the Prime Minister of India making his way for his first itinerary on his visit, a bilateral meeting with US President Joe Biden. Remember, Prime Minister Modi arrived in the US a short while ago. He met with the Indian diaspora at the airport in Philadelphia and later at his hotel in Wilmington, Delaware. And he is now reaching the venue of his bilateral meeting with President Joe Biden. We'll get those visuals to you in just a bit. When we get those, we'll play it out for you. But that's the news we are tracking on this special broadcast at this very moment. The bilateral between the leaders of India and the US is about to begin. We'll get those visuals to you in just a bit. Right, in the meantime, if Ambassador Shankar, if you could finish making a point there, please.
Yeah, I was saying that, it had a very tentative beginning.
Okay.
Quad, because countries couldn't make up their mind about how they saw China, whether it was an opportunity or they viewed it as a strategic competitor. Since then, Chinese aggressive behavior, seeking unilateral solutions to their maritime and territorial claims, both in the South China Sea, including vis-a-vis country, and the East China Sea, and on the land border with India, have actually aroused apprehensions about the need and also reinforced the urgency to reshape a balance in the Indo-Pacific, which is based in international law and not under the dominance of any one country. And I think that's where the Quad comes in. And President Biden took the initiative to elevate it to the summit level and to put in place the mechanisms, meetings of foreign ministers, meetings of commerce ministers, various subjects that have been identified for Quad cooperation. All these have actually institutionalized the Quad and made it an important grouping in the Indo-Pacific. Is a diplomatic grouping and not a defense grouping, because India is not comfortable in a defense alliance. But of course, the other three are all allies of India, Japan, and the US. So it's largely because of India that the group has remained a diplomatic grouping. And we have worked in areas where all four countries would be comfortable working.
Ambassador Mohan Kumar, the Quad seemed to have come together way back in 2004 in the aftermath of the tsunami, and it was launched formally in 2007 and revived in 2017 after a full decade under President Trump. But it was under President Biden that the summits began to take place. Are you happy with the way Quad is shaping up?
Oh, I think I'm extremely happy because considering a Chinese interlocutor reportedly said that when the Quad was established that it would dissipate like sea foam is what the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is reported to have said. If you look at what the Quad has traversed in terms of the speech that the late leader Shinzo Abe made in the Indian Parliament in 2007, till 2017, first Australia and then India, I think we dragged our feet. But considering all that, I think the Quad has turned out to be an extremely important grouping. I would think that they focus on non-traditional areas of security. I would still call it a security grouping. After all, it is called the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. I would say that it is non-traditional areas of security like climate change. We are talking about health. We are talking cyber security, and we are talking how to approach pandemics, how to actually have critical emerging technologies. So a whole range of issues which are strategic, but not traditional security issues, but non-traditional security issues. So on the whole, they've managed to survive, they've managed to flourish, they're here to stay. And I think they deliver very strongly on areas that I believe are non-traditional areas of security. So on the whole, anybody has to be very happy with what you are seeing in the Quad, given the choppy kind of, given the checkered history that it has had.
Professor Pant, anything in particular that you would be looking for in a Quad joint statement or outcome document? Would you, for instance, be parsing the text of the statement to make sense of the context or subtext of it all?
Well, I think, this particular summit will be more about consolidating the gains that have been made over the last few years in particular. So in that sense, any dramatic developments will not be expected, especially as both President Biden and President Kishida would be relinquishing their offices later this year. So in that sense, I think that the idea would be that, look, this is the consolidation phase. And once the elections are over and once the new leadership is in place in Japan and the elections are over in the US, perhaps a new roadmap can be laid out. But even within that context, I think what has happened in a few areas deserves attention, and one hopes that those would continue. Those aspects would be strengthened, particularly maritime domain awareness in the Indo-Pacific. I think is a huge area. Given the huge geography and given the geographical contours, it is extremely important for like-minded partners in the Indo-Pacific to start working together, whether it is in terms of intelligence and information sharing or just in terms of making assessments about the changing nature of the security environment. So I hope that continues to be strengthened. But I think overall, you are also looking at a phase in the evolution of Quad, where Quad has to make stronger claims about being an alternative to what China is offering. So one would hope that the kind of commitments that countries have made, Quad countries have made as part of their larger Quad agenda, those commitments are adhered to. There is a strong timeline attached to those commitments, and we can see visible difference on the ground, because only then will this idea that you have an alternative to China, where smaller countries in the region can actually look at that alternative more confidently and coherently, that would come to fruition. So I do think that those aspects should be looked at carefully, even in this during the summit and the outcome of the summit, when actually politically much less should be expected.
Right, Professor Pant, Ambassadors Kumar and Shankar, I'll continue the discussion on the Quad in just a bit, but Prime Minister Modi, we are told, has arrived at Greenville, Delaware for a bilateral meeting with US President Joe Biden. The Prime Minister will also be holding bilateral meetings with the other Quad leaders on the margins of the Quad Summit in Wilmington, Delaware, as well as attending the summit itself and addressing a key UN meeting in the next couple of days in the US. These are the latest visuals coming to you from Wilmington of the Prime Minister's motorcade entering the venue of his bilateral meeting with US President Joe Biden. This is the fourth in-person Quad Summit and the sixth overall since 2021, when under President Joe Biden, the Quad leaders held their maiden summit. If you're just joining us, these are the latest visuals coming to you from Wilmington in the U.S. state of Delaware, which is Joe Biden's hometown, where Prime Minister Modi has reached the venue of his bilateral meeting with President Joe Biden of the U.S. This, viewers, is the first visit to the U.S. by Prime Minister Modi in his third term in office. He was sworn in a few months ago, and this is his first such visit to the U.S. since he won a third consecutive election. Prime Minister Modi reached the U.S. a few hours ago. He landed at Philadelphia International Airport and then made his way to his hotel in Wilmington, where he met with the Indian diaspora. And now we are told he is about to begin his bilateral, the first item on his itinerary, so to speak, with U.S. President Joe Biden. All right, we still have with us our guests, Ambassador Meera Shankar, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, and Professor Harshvardhan Pant. Ambassador Shankar, if I were to take you back to what Minister Jaishankar said some time ago, he said that the Quad stands for something. It is not against anyone. In that context, how much do you think, in the context of the Indo-Pacific, China would come up for discussion at this in-person summit?
It will. I think a White House spokesperson has said that it is something which is likely to figure because each of the countries concerned have, involved in the Quad have their own concerns regarding China. There have been recent incidents in the South China Sea between China and the Philippines. There have been, intrusion of Chinese fighter jets and ships, naval ships, across the median line in the Taiwan Straits. And again, more recently, a Chinese ship intruded into Japanese waters.
Right.
So there are concerns that all the countries have regarding China, which they will certainly discuss, because the primary purpose of the Quad was to ensure freedom of navigation in international waters and a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific. So it's certainly going to figure very much, because all countries depend on the trade routes for moving goods across these areas. It also is, even in the economic realm, there are concerns about unfair competition, that, a country which doesn't play by the rules poses for the international system. So these are all issues that will figure, but it is a grouping which really is looking at what it can do in the Indo-Pacific region to help ensure a more peaceful, stable environment, and also to ensure greater economic prosperity for the countries of the region. So it is looking at itself more as a grouping which will shape a balance for alternatives, rather than actually, be against China in that sense, targeting China.
Indeed. Ambassador Kumar, if, as Ambassador Shankar says, China is the proverbial elephant in the room when the four leaders meet in person for the Quad summit, if that is true, and given what the U.S. officials have quoted Biden as saying that elevating the Quad is and has been his priority, do you think the talk of a maritime security agreement would be welcome by the Quad members and welcome as well by the countries in the Indo-Pacific region?
Oh, absolutely. I think for a long time, the Chinese have had a semi-permanent presence in the Indian Ocean. And as Ambassador Shankar said earlier, for the first time, the Quad countries extending their Indo-Pacific maritime domain awareness to the Indian Ocean. Hitherto, it's been concentrated on the Pacific Islands and the East Asian region. This is the first time they will be doing it to the Indian Ocean region, and India will obviously lead that exercise. This is extremely important from an Indian perspective.
Right.
I think maritime domain awareness is the first step, so that if you know what is going on, the presence of different countries, it is only then you can take countermeasures. So from that perspective, I think the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Program is extremely important. 3 pilot programs are expected to be put in operation. There is already one for the Pacific Islands, as I said, East Asia, and then one for the Indian Ocean, which India will lead. This has not come a moment too late for India. From 2008 onwards, we've had Chinese presence in the Indian Ocean, and I think we've been extremely concerned. It's no secret that we've been concerned about it. After all, it is Indian Ocean and it is bang next to us. So we should be really interested in what is going on. There has been a definitional problem in Quad compared to the American definition, which stops somewhere at the western shores of the Indian Ocean, and our definition, which goes on to the eastern shores of Africa. So I'm particularly pleased that the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness will hitherto include the Indian Ocean region. I think that's a very significant development.
Fair enough. Professor Pant, I want you as well to weigh in on these 2 developments. One, the talk of an Indian Ocean Maritime Security Agreement among the 4 Quad members, number 1. And number 2, a bipartisan Congressional Caucus in the US, both Republicans and Democrats, as well as senators and House representatives. Given the fact that they're meeting at a time when the elections are due in the US, you think this consensus bodes well for the Quad?
Absolutely. I think we know that, and we have seen, if you go back to President Trump's administration, it was President Trump who started this process of reinvigorating the Quad. Although much of the legwork was done by President Biden. So I do think that there is a bipartisan consensus across the board when it comes to Quad, when it comes to the Indo-Pacific, when it comes to strengthening American presence and American partnerships in the region. And India is largely seen as a fulcrum of those partnerships because, as we have discussed earlier, India is a unique case. India is unlike Japan and Australia. India is not an alliance partner. So what India brings to the table is value addition to American presence in the region, and therefore Americans are also beginning to think innovatively about their presence in the Indo-Pacific, contrary to a very traditional understanding of having a traditional alliance relationship with its partners. So I think certainly what India has done, what India has contributed, is a much more flexible understanding of what America can do in this time of regional turbulence in Indo-Pacific, and that is generating this bipartisan consensus. So I do think that this is important for India to continue to do that, and in response continue to engage across the board, which I think has been happening now for a while. The other issue of Indian Ocean is also very, very interesting, as Ambassador Kumar mentioned. And this is something that I think a lot has been discussed about it. But we know that at the end of the day, Chinese presence has been strengthening in the Indian Ocean, and the presence of like-minded partners of India, that is something that India wants.
Right. In the meantime, we're getting these latest visuals again of the 2 principals, President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Modi, meeting and greeting each other before they sit down for a bilateral meeting, before the Quad Summit actually begins in Delaware, in Wilmington, Delaware, the hometown of President Joe Biden. These are the latest visuals of Prime Minister Modi meeting and greeting President Joe Biden with his trademark traditional warm hug before they are walking in to sit down for a proper bilateral meeting. Right, as we stay on these visuals, we are approaching the end of hour one of this special broadcast. May I take this opportunity to thank two of my guests, Ambassador Meera Shankar and Professor Harsh Vardhan Pant, for joining us and sharing their thoughts and insights with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Ambassador Mohan Kumar will continue to stay with us for the remainder of this broadcast as well. Ambassador Kumar, I'll come back to you momentarily. But for now, we are staying on these visuals of the meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Joe Biden. The two leaders have met at the hometown of President Joe Biden for a bilateral meeting before they sit down for the Quad Summit, also happening in the same town. Right. In the meantime, let me pull up some more news for you, which we want to play out for the benefit of viewers joining us. The first story which we want to play out is about the diaspora. Now, a mega Indian diaspora event is being organized on Sunday to welcome Prime Minister Modi in the US. Some 15,000 Indian Americans will gather in Nassau County, a suburb of New York City. DD India Shubhendu Ghosh has more.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is visiting United States. Besides the strategic and diplomatic engagements at the Quad Summit and at United Nations, there is great anticipation around Prime Minister's connection with the Indian diaspora. In fact, I'm standing right now in front of this mega stadium, which is the Nassau Coliseum. This is going to be the venue for this very special diaspora program that Prime Minister would be engaging in. I have with me two members from the organizing committee of this mega program, Jagdish and Suhag. Jagdish, from you, I'd like to learn, what are the arrangements made? How are you planning to make this event a memorable one?
Well, it's going to be a memorable event. Just imagine the Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to address New York after 10 years. After Madison Square Garden, this is the first time. We have been after Narendra Modi ji to come and address us, but because of his busy schedule, he couldn't do. Thank God, finally he has agreed. And just imagine, day after tomorrow, 15,000 strong New Yorkers plus people coming from 40 states of America. 500 organizations, 500 cultural program artists coming together for this mega event at this mega stadium to welcome Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Nassau County. And this is the first time ever any Prime Minister has come to Nassau County. So I was talking to the Nassau County executive, that is Mayor of Nassau County. He said, Jagdish, I'm so excited. 2 months back, I hosted a cricket team, and now I'm hosting your Prime Minister, who is not only a popular leader of Bharat, but he's a global leader.
Right. Suhag, from you, I'd like to learn about the name of this mega program. I understand it is called Modi and US, but one can also read it as Modi and Us. Interesting play of words. How do you see it?
I think it's really up to whoever is saying it. You can say India and US and India and us, but it really means the same thing. It's about our connection with India. And it's about the Indian American diaspora being ambassadors of a cultural ethos of unity and diversity. And it's such a nice blending of cultures, because to be Indian is to be pluralistic, to be American is to be pluralistic. And that's why the US-India friendship is a natural one. And that's why Indian Americans are also a natural fit to their adopted country, the United States.
Right. I understand that almost a mini India is going to be created here in terms of the cultural performances, special presentations that are going to be here when the Prime Minister arrives at the stadium. Jagdish, take us through the special programs that you've lined up for Prime Minister when he's here.
Well, like I told you, 500 artists are going to perform here, and you will see a mini Bharat here. In Nassau County, in America, you'll see a mini Bharat from, participating, performing Indian arts to Bollywood, patriotic song, you can say on and on. I think Sohagji can take a little more about the cultural program, what we have lined up.
Absolutely. Well, what's really wonderful about this program is that not only did it garner a tremendous response, so many internationally and nationally known artists who came forward to volunteer for the program. We have classical, folk, funky, you name it. We have every genre possible. We have north, south, east, west, and everything in between in terms of India. All of those cultures represented. So the theme of unity and diversity, it is through and through. We see it from the people that are coming, the audience, the participants, to the programming, to the volunteers. We are unity and diversity.
All right. On that note, finally, the kind of role that Indian America diaspora is playing in bringing the two great democracies and societies closer. How do you reflect on that thought through this event as well?
Well, I'll tell you, America being the oldest democracy and India being the largest democracy, we are natural partners. And I believe Indian American diaspora plays very important role in this. I call it people-to-people relation. The role Indian American have played for bilateral relation is amazing. Today you see we have congressman, governor of the state, and today if you see even Kamala Harris, who is half Indian, is contesting as a president of the United States. That shows how important Indian diaspora is in USA. We are very politically savvy, and hopefully in next few years you'll see Indian American as the president of United States.
All right, on that hopeful note, thank you very much for speaking with DD India. So the stage is all set for the mega diaspora event when Prime Minister Narendra Modi reaches United States here in New York at Long Island. Nassau Coliseum is all ready to welcome Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Indian diaspora with camera person Sumit Shubhendu Ghosh for DD India in New York.
All right, you're watching the continuous coverage here on DD India of India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's ongoing visit to the US. Let me take a moment to welcome a new guest who is joining us on this broadcast. Mr. Atul Aneja is joining us. He's a senior journalist. He joins us from Gurugram, a New Delhi suburb. Also with me is Ambassador Mohan Kumar. Gentlemen, thank you and welcome. In the meantime, let me just quickly play out once more the visuals of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who was welcomed by President Biden at his residence in Delaware. The US and the Indian leaders are holding discussions on a wide range of topics in their bilateral meeting that is taking place as we speak. These are the latest visuals of the two leaders, Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India and President Joe Biden of the US, meeting and greeting each other before they sat down for a bilateral meeting on the margins of the Quad Summit that will take place in the next several hours. So if you're just joining us, you're watching the first item on Prime Minister Modi's itinerary in the US, his bilateral meeting with President Joe Biden of the US in Biden's hometown of Wilmington, Delaware, where the two leaders have met and are holding a bilateral meeting on the margins, as I said, of the fourth in-person Quad Summit being held in the US this year. It was India's turn to host the Quad Summit this year, but President Biden requested Prime Minister Modi so that he could host it this year in his hometown, whereby all members and all countries agreed that India will host it next year, and whoever wins the US presidential election can be expected to travel to India next year for the fifth in-person summit of the Quad leaders. All right, let me go back to my guests, Ambassador Mohan Kumar and Mr. Atul Aneja. Mr. Aneja, if I can start with you very quickly, the two principals meeting for a bilateral, how crucial do you think these talks would be?
Ramesh, I think these are very important talks. You know, there is, the context is important here.
Why do you say that?
Because President Biden is on his way out.
Okay.
But, you know, at the same time, it's when you meet like this, it's that distinct wisdom, you know, your totality of your interaction, of your thoughts, which comes to the fore. And, you know, these are the language and the sentiment which will be conveyed will be both for lack of another word, distilled wisdom from the part of President Wisdom. These are his sort of last words in terms of taking India-US relations forward. So there's a special meeting which is going to take place over here. And this you remember for a long time. These are sort of legacy words which will come out from President Joe Biden. It's like passing it's like a relay race. You're passing the torch to Prime Minister Modi and giving your final thoughts on how the race should be taken forward in terms of not only bilateral, but also, Ramesh, what you mentioned, that this is also the Quad summit which is going to take place here. So I think very, very important. And for Prime Minister Modi, it's really a very personalized way of saying farewell to President Joe Biden. So I think a very special meeting, Ramesh.
Indeed. Ambassador Kumar, coming to you now, you mentioned something very interesting in the context of this much talked about Indian Ocean Maritime Agreement that the Quad leaders are expected to adopt towards the end of their talks later in the day in the US. Ambassador Kumar, you spoke about the conceptualization in the US of what the Quad cooperation stands for, where it, as opposed to ending on the western maritime border or boundary of India, it now extends all the way up to the Horn of Africa and the southern Indian Ocean as well. Is the Quad, in your estimation, about to be institutionalized going forward?
Yes, I think one of the main accomplishments of Quad is that it has become a permanent forum. It's here to stay. I think the initial hesitation by Australia in particular, but also India, I think those hesitations have been overcome. I see this grouping now in permanence. I see the Indo-Pacific as a grouping or as a geographical region which has been accepted by everybody. I see the grouping delivering, as I said, in non-traditional security areas like maritime security, you have cyber security, you have environment, you have climate change, you have public health, you've got economic security. All these are non-traditional security, Ramesh. And that is why I am absolutely in agreement. If you ask me whether it will be a forum that will endure, I think the answer is a categorical, unconditional yes. We will have to see how the Quad can take it to the next level. That is the challenge. I think what the Quad has done so far is they have established a number of principles. For example, they've got principles for infrastructure, they've got principles for climate change, even in public health, I think they've established some norms. The question now that you have to ask yourself is how practices can be instituted based on those principles, how the Quad countries can reinforce cooperation, take it to the next level, and deliver public security, health security, cyber security, undersea cables, all of these things. How can this be delivered as a global good for the countries of the Indo-Pacific? Indo-Pacific is not just the 4 countries of Quad, as you will appreciate. There are a number of littoral countries in Indian Ocean which are important, the Pacific Islands, and then the East Asia Sea, Southeast Asia. So I think the next phase of Quad will be how to deliver global goods to countries of the region. It is only then that I think the countries will buy into the notion of Quad. So far, the 4 countries are convinced that this is an important grouping, and I think we have achieved very substantial things. But I would say the other countries of the Indo-Pacific region must buy into the concept of Quad. That is really the challenge, and I think we are making progress, but personally, I'd like to see much more progress on that front.
Fair enough. Gentlemen, hold your thoughts. I'll come back to you momentarily. In the meantime, we're getting some more news from the US. Now, on his arrival at the Philadelphia airport, Prime Minister Modi received a warm welcome by members of the Indian diaspora, and my colleague Amritpal Singh spoke to some of them. Take a listen.
As Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived in the US for a 3-day visit, His first stop was Wilmington in Delaware. I'm right now in Wilmington. He was, received by the Indian community with a lot of enthusiasm. I have members of the Indian community. Sir, what is the sort of excitement amongst the Indian diaspora here on arrival of Prime Minister?
Oh, this is an unbelievable event for us in Delaware, and all of us are truly experiencing a very magical event, something that was unthinkable several years ago. Thanks to President Biden for inviting Modi ji to Delaware, which is a very small state. However, does hold a lot of sway because of Biden's presidency. So thanks to that presidency for having us experience this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, which I didn't think will ever happen. So truly a magical day for all of the Indians in Delaware and all of the Indian diaspora here in Delaware.
Okay. How have things changed? You know, we've seen for the Indian diaspora when you've been in the U.S., living in the U.S. for a long time. Do you, as in part of the diaspora, have things changed for you?
Things have changed a lot. So I think 25 years ago, India was not really on the map. Not many people knew about where this country is and whatever, you know. But now, with the growing population of Indians in the U.S., I think people are getting noticed, and they are kind of, we get to interact and socialize a lot more with the local communities over here.
And I think Modi ji has brought India to the forefront. He has showed that India is the best in terms of technology, healthcare, you name it. Yep. And he has put India on the map, and that makes all of us very important here. And it makes us feel very proud that India is again back on the forefront.
As Madam was saying that, he's put India on the world map. Indians were always very hardworking people, both either in the technology sector or even blue-collar workers. But with the rising stature of the country, do you think that directly affects how the world sees you, the Indian diaspora?
Yes, definitely. You know, India has elevated all of us, even though we are not Indians outside living in the country. We are elevated to the highest level. And we see that we are witnessing the golden age of India that we thought we read in history books during Gupta dynasty. Now it's happening again during Modi's administration, and we are very, very happy, excited, thankful that this is happening during our lifetime.
So you can see the sort of excitement and enthusiasm in the Indian diaspora here. The Prime Minister, though, interacted very briefly with them as he begins his official program, bilateral meetings with President Biden, with Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Anthony Albanese, and after that the Quad Leaders Summit. But the interaction with the Indian community and the diaspora does leave them with a sense of ownership as the Prime Minister adds a personal touch. With cameraman Praveen Johar, this is Amritpal Singh for DD India in Wilmington, Delaware.
Now, Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US has generated tremendous enthusiasm among the Indian community there. My colleague Nikhil Singh had a conversation with some Indian Americans in the US state of New Jersey. Take a listen.
Modi's visit to USA is very significant, and the most exciting part of it is the community event for which I am there in New Jersey, and people from Indian origin are with me, and they are so excited and they are ready to talk about that event. So how excited you are about that event of Prime Minister Narendra Modi?
We are very excited, and we are proud that we got a Prime Minister like Narendra Modi. And we all would like to say thank you to him for creating a Ram Mandir and doing so many good things for India, and for which now people know us, and people ask about India, ask about our nuclear program, ask about our space program, and so many things. So thank you, Modi ji.
Right. How excited are you, sir? What preparations have you made?
Yeah, this is one of the very big event for us here in the US, having our Indian Prime Minister visiting us. That's a big deal, right? And we are very proud of him, because the way his thought process is, the way he made people of India felt like the borders are secured, the way he handled China issue, very proud of him.
Right. So you have an American flag in your hand. So that denotes the India-US friendship.
Yes. I am. This is a very proud moment, and this is with the Modi ji coming to US. It's like right before Diwali is like Diwali before Diwali. So we have double Diwali, and it's a proud moment for all Indian Americans. And I'm very excited to go to the event.
Okay. So you are also preparing to go to the event?
We both are going to the event, and we are very excited. Under Modi ji's leadership and administration, government has achieved a lot, and I'm hoping that this momentum will continue, and government will achieve more and more for India's development, for India and US tie relationship, and we all are very excited about it.
Right. So you people are excited around us here to attend the community event. I'll talk to some more people, right?
Hi, I'm also going to visit this Modi ji's event, and I'm volunteering also because I feel that this is my own country leader who is here to support us, and we feel so proud for India, and then the way he's handling the way he's meeting the people domestically and international is awesome. So of course I'm very proud of that, and I would like to be attend and meet Modi ji. Very excited.
He's proud of Prime Minister Modi. I have one more person who's holding an Indian flag. So we know that how excited you are.
I am very much excited. I am Manish Sharma, and can proudly say that I am an Indian American in any part of the world because Modi ji has put India everywhere in the world where we can be recognized as Indian, and he is the most fearless, selfless leader working for India and its citizens.
Okay, so here are the positive thoughts which you can see that the people around us are giving, and they are really very enthusiastic, very excited for the event, and they are all set for the event, just waiting for Prime Minister Narendra Modi to come and just address what he wants to say to these Indian Americans. With cameraman Sanjay Jaina, this is Nikhil Singh reporting for DD India from New Jersey.
All right, going back to my guests on the special broadcast, Ambassador Mohan Kumar and Mr. Atul Aneja. Mr. Aneja, I want to talk about the diaspora as well, but before that, I want to go back to the point Ambassador Kumar made before we broke for that news update from the US. He says he would like to see the Quad go to or raise to the next level, as it were. In your estimation, what's the next big idea for the Quad? What would you like the Quad to be seen doing in the near term?
Ramesh, it's very interesting the way Quad has evolved.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time when it was seen as a security grouping.
Mm-hmm.
And to be very honest, it was at one time seen as something which was there for the containment of China.
Mm-hmm.
I think that during COVID has moved big time. I think we have, with the Sagar doctrine coming in, which is security and for all and growth in the region, which is India's Indo-Pacific doctrine, and Prime Minister's own statement at the Shangri-La dialogue a few years ago, that we are not interested in containment of China really, but we are really for trade, for all the positives which Ambassador Kumar has spoken about. So I think that shift away from the China containment element to public goods like vaccine development, climate change, etc. I think it's a very, very important tangent which India took. When it comes to containment of China, the new organization called Caucus came into the picture, of which we are not a part.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where should Quad go? I think on the trajectory which we have taken, it has to go to the next level.
Which is?
Which is the other areas of public goods which we have spoken about.
Mm-hmm.
That particular element has to be stepped up.
Okay.
And as Ambassador Kumar has said, that you need more stakeholders joining that, and in the region, in the Indo-Pacific region.
And are you referring to the so-called Quad Plus?
Yeah, I mean, the nomenclature is not so important, but
okay.
Exactly how more countries get invested into it, Ramesh.
Okay.
Now there are middle powers in this region which would, we had the visit of the Malaysian Prime Minister, for example, coming into India. There is South Korea on the other end. And then, of course, are these countries in the Indian Ocean. Where do countries like Fiji or Papua New Guinea or countries with Indian diaspora populations, do they also get on board in some way? I think these are the questions which the Quad will have to think through. In what capacity will they come in? Will there be, does it mean an expansion of the Quad as full members, or could we have dialogue partners? These are things which we have to think through. But I think the framework is very clear. So within that framework, now we need more people to join. In what capacity is something which has to be thought through.
Fair enough. Ambassador Kumar, coming back to the point you raised, when you said that you would like to see the Quad go to the next level, as it were, would you also be talking about expansion of the Quad, or would you rather focus on consolidation first?
I would say consolidation. I think an expansion will arguably lead to the dilution of the fundamental objectives of Quad.
Right.
So I would say that you consolidate the membership, but what I meant by taking it to the next level is, let me give you a concrete example. In the area of climate change, for example, there is a climate services initiative which has been launched by the Quad, which will enable countries in the Pacific Islands and the Indian Ocean to be able to respond to disasters quickly based on scientific information which will be available, which will be made available to the small countries of the Pacific Islands and the Indian Ocean. So those kind of specific concrete projects which will help these countries to cope with climate change, cope with public health, cope with undersea cables so that internet is not disrupted. Take the example of cybersecurity, where attacks are happening against hospitals, schools, and telecom institutions with disturbing regularity. So the Quad has said, we will give you training in how to guard yourself against cyber attacks. Cyber attacks are becoming very, very common. And for many of these small countries, they cannot handle cyber attacks. A small country like Papua New Guinea or Seychelles or even Mauritius for that matter. This is what I mean by public good. This will not be done by other countries. I don't want to be undiplomatic and name which other countries will not do it. But I think this can only be done by the Quad. And that is why I think Quad can play an extremely important role by enabling these countries to counter the climate change problem, the cybersecurity problem, how to make public health a priority. Can we make these countries ready for the next outbreak? Because everybody tells me the COVID is not the last time it's going to happen. We are going to have an outbreak of a pandemic sooner or later. So can you be prepared for it? So I think those are the kind of issues where I think the Quad can make a real difference. I think delivery of public goods to these countries will enable these countries to buy into the concept of Quad. The Quad has to strike a balance between deterrence and assurance. The deterrence is for countries which believe in unilaterally changing the status quo in Indo-Pacific. And that is something the Quad will object. In fact, the American spokesperson has said there will be strong language on South China Sea and strong language on North Korea. That is bound to be there in the Quad communique when it comes out at the end of today. But I think what I am trying to say is that on many of the other issues, if countries see the Quad as benefiting them in a concrete fashion, then they will buy into the concept of Quad much more than now. I think that is what the Quad must aim to do in the next 2 or 3 years.
Absolutely. Point taken there, Ambassador Kumar. We are approaching the last half hour of our special broadcast, and we have two more broad issues to cover. One is the UN reform in the context of the Summit of the Future that PM Modi will address, and the second is diaspora or people-to-people ties. We'll come to that in just a bit. But before that, let me pull up some more news for our viewers. Now, Prime Minister Modi, as I said, will address the Summit of the Future at the UN on 23rd September. And my colleague Amritpal Singh has sent us this report from the UN headquarters. Take a look.
United Nations, the apex global body which has often been criticized for failing humanity,
to address its current problems. The UN is now staging a summit of the future, which has an ambitious agenda to find solutions to the emerging problems, the solutions to problems which may affect humanity in the near future, to evolve a global consensus, a pact for future which solves humanity's problems. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be addressing world leaders on Monday at the Summit of the Future, making a strong case for keeping international commitments on sustainable development, financing for the developing countries, and transforming the global governance architecture to make it more effective and equitable. But the big question is, will world leaders be able to keep their differences aside and find solutions to the problems of the world? But despite the cynicism, it is a welcome step by the UN because, as the Mahatma once said, the future depends on what you do today. With cameraman Sumit Naudyal, this is Amritpal Singh for DD India at the UN headquarters in New York.
And Amritpal Singh also caught up with 6-year-old Ranveer Singh Sachdeva from India. Yes, you heard that right. 6-year-old Ranveer Singh Sachdeva. He is the youngest participant at the Summit of the Future. Take a listen.
As the United Nations holds the Summit of the Future here at the UN headquarters, one of the pillars of the summit is science and technology and innovation, where the UN will try and achieve a global digital compact to use technology for humanity equitably, to have youth participate in it. I have with me one kid who's not even a youth, he's just a 6-year-old child, Ranveer Sachdeva, who's traveled all the way from Delhi here in New York to participate in the Summit of the Future. He's written a book on AI. Ranveer, thank you very much for speaking to us. First of all, tell us, why are you here?
So I'm here traveling from India to, and I'm the world's youngest participant in the Summit of the Future, which is a part of the UN General Assembly. It mainly targets on how youth can impact the AI world for world peace. So I'm here to attend the Summit of the Future.
Okay. You're not even youth technically, you are just a child right now, a 6-year-old child. What grade do you study in?
I'm studying in third grade.
Okay. So how do you think as a child AI affects you or the other children of the world?
So AI affects us in many different ways.
Okay.
I've always said that our generation was born with AI because AI is all around us. We ask Alexa, right from your conversation with Alexa and Siri, to YouTube and Netflix suggesting you more songs and videos you like to watch. It's all AI.
Okay. And I understand you've written a book. What is the name of the book?
Are you born with AI?
Okay. And you say you are born with AI?
Yeah. Because, it's all around us.
Okay, great. So as Ranveer Sachdeva says, AI is all around us, but more importantly, he's here as the youngest participant here in the Summit of the Future. Well, if this is the future, then it looks bright. With cameraman Sumit Naudyal, this is Amritpal Singh for DD India at the UN headquarters in New York.
And the future is indeed bright. Now, DD India Shubhendu Ghosh visits the New York University campus to find out what young people expect from the summit and what they feel about emerging technologies.
Summit of the Future is taking place at the United Nations in New York. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be addressing this summit. I have with me what looks like a bright future. Well, I'm talking about young students, Indian and American, at the prestigious New York University. And this red building that you see behind us, this imposing structure, is the Bob's Library, an iconic structure that is center of the academic and intellectual life of the students here. I have with me Alvina and her friends who are here to talk with us. Alvina, first, not very far from here at the United Nations headquarters, Summit of the Future is going to be deliberating on sustainable tomorrow. What are your thoughts on what this summit is going to be deliberating on, and what kind of action-oriented agenda would you like to see?
I would say, obviously, we, the millennials or the Gen Z, are really looking forward to leave a better planet for our next generations. And what we would hope is, obviously, all the global leaders and all the stakeholders to take some actionable insights to make sure that we are moving towards a more sustainable future for us.
In response to your question, I think the summit does bring a lot of hope for the future. In the past, a lot of summits that have occurred, I feel like, have not really achieved the goals that they have set. I'm hoping that this one will be more action-driven and really will solve all the problems that they have identified in previous summits.
Hi, I think the summit is mainly focusing on tackling the environmental issues, which is actually the need of the hour, because India has been progressing in every other domain, especially under the current government.
All right. Another aspect of the Summit of the Future is the manner in which new emerging technologies are going to be looked at, are going to be adapted by different nations. AI is something that has been making a lot of buzz around the world.
As you talked about AI, so AI is one of the fastest growing technologies right now. And with the growth of AI, the growth of semiconductor industries has been massive. And with the recent success of the Semicon meeting in India, where everyone around the world came to India to promote the semiconductor industry and lead to the growth of AI, I'm pretty hopeful about it.
As an AI architect myself, I've seen that AI plays a really big role in a lot of industries, healthcare, any type of engineering, healthcare, AI plays a big role. So, as the name suggests, Summit of the Future, and it gives us a glimpse of the future.
I strongly feel that technological advancement is a value that is shared by both India and the United States. And Prime Minister in his speeches also mentions about sustainable development, technological advancement, and talks about Viksit Bharat.
All right, these were young, bright students, Indian and American, at the New York University, talking about the Summit of the Future and the potential of India-United States ties. With camera person Sumit Nodial, Shubhendu Ghosh for DD India in New York.
All right, let me go back to my guests, Ambassador Mohan Kumar and Mr. Atul Aneja, for the remainder of this special broadcast. We have about 15 or 20 minutes left on this program. Ambassador Kumar, I have two broad topics to cover: looking ahead to the New York leg of the Prime Minister's visit, the Summit of the Future in the UN headquarters, and the Diaspora Connect. If I can start with the UN Summit of the Future, how do you look at this call or need for UN reform in general and UN Security Council reform in particular?
Ramesh, I think this Summit of the Future by the United Nations is extremely important. It comes at a very critical juncture for the UN. A number of observers believe this may be the last chance for the United Nations to redeem itself, because it's widely accepted that the United Nations, which is in many ways the ultimate representative of multilateralism, has not delivered. Now, it is not delivered for a variety of reasons, but everybody agrees that one of the reasons why it is not delivered is because it has found itself incapable of reforming itself. And among the reforms, the most significant reform that it has not been able to carry out is the reform of the UN Security Council. So one way of judging the summit for the future is, will there be an attempt to reform? Because it is going to be really the last attempt in many ways, because if this does not deliver, there is a fear among many observers that the United Nations will just disappear and reduce itself into irrelevance. So this is a last opportunity in many ways. Several proposals have been floated, and in any scheme of things, India will have to get some kind of membership. The real question is whether we get it with the veto or without a veto. But I was listening to your young audience, and I think the two other issues which will be prominent in this summit of the future, one will obviously be climate change, the other will be technology, particularly artificial intelligence.
Right.
So the summit of the future will have to address UN's own future through reforms, climate change, which has turned out to be an existential problem for humanity, and last but not least, the role of artificial intelligence, technology, and how this will affect economic development, how this will affect the future of the youth. This is something the Summit of the Future must address.
Indeed, Mr. Aneja, when we talk about quantum computing, AI or semiconductors, they all come under the rubric of what is known as the ICET in the India-US context, the Initiative on Critical Emerging Technologies. In that context, how do you look at the initiative of the Prime Minister to meet with the CEOs in New York City in terms of attracting FDI, in terms of transfer of technology and Make in India program as well?
Ramesh, exceptionally important, because these are some of the areas where the US has taken a cutting edge lead. So if India is to move in this direction, which it has already committed itself, we our whole semiconductor mission is a pointer to the direction which we are taking in terms of technology and AI and Industry 4.0, etc. So this will be a very, very important meeting, because that's where the technology can come to India. And also, I think what is going to be probably, the point of some friction is because our concept is Atmanirbhar Bharat or Make in India. That technology has to come to India and then India makes for the rest of the world. We are just not a market for technology. That the technology has to come, we absorb, and then because of certain strengths and competitiveness of the Indian economy, something which China had done at one point, that we manufacture it at home and then export it to the rest of the world, in terms of that we become the factory of the world in high technology. So those are going to be the crucial issues which will have to be negotiated downstream. What the Prime Minister can do is, talk and get things done in principle, but downstreaming of that will be exceptionally important if India has to emerge as a technology leader on a global scale, and if it has to march in the direction of Viksit Bharat, which is developed economy, of which high technology is going to be a crucial part, Ramesh. So this is one very, very important meeting which is important. And I'm sure the Prime Minister will have similar, or somebody else is going to have similar conversations with countries which also have a competitive strength in this area. We've had a dialogue with Foxconn of Taiwan. And I'm sure this is going to be a topic. But, the United States had its strength in this particular domain. And I think this is going to be a very, very crucial conversation. But more importantly for me is to getting into the details of it and what finally translates it on the shop floor in India.
Absolutely.
I think that's going to be the crucial part of it. Slogans are good, but downstreaming that, the devil is in the detail, as they say. So that's where we need to watch out for.
Indeed. Do stay on. Let me pull up some more news for our viewers as we are approaching the end of this special broadcast. Now addressing the Summit of the Future at the United Nations in the presence of the leaders from the member countries of the UN. We'll pull up some news for you as well. One of the major agendas of India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi during this visit. Now, India's ambassador to the UN, P. Harish, explains the importance of this summit and India's role in helping nations of the global south meet the challenges of the future.
The focus has been, what can we do to reboot the multilateral system, to make it fit for purpose to deliver development to the world's majority. I think with this in mind, the Summit of the Future process had begun, and India actively participated along with all other nations in this process. What can we do to achieve sustainable development goals, have an SDG stimulus so that we can try to reach our Agenda 2030 objectives? What is it we can do more to contribute to achieving our goals on climate change? What is it that we could do in the digital arena to leapfrog development and give a leg up to countries in the global south so that they can cover the distance that they could not all these years? What more we can do to transforming global governance, to ensuring that the institutions are fit for purpose for this new era? And most importantly, it is about the youth of the world. India is able to provide all the necessities for its people. When India is able to harness science and technology, digital platforms and digital public goods for 1.4 billion people, when India is able to ensure food security, energy security, and develop new paradigms of development, and be a model and make these available to our friends and partners in the global south, I think that makes a huge impact, and that is the true importance of India. And when Prime Minister comes, I think his message would be the example that he has set India on this development process.
All right, I still have with me my guests, Ambassador Mohan Kumar and Mr. Atul Aneja. Ambassador Kumar, I want to ask both of you I want to cover one last topic or subject on this broadcast, and that is diaspora or people-to-people ties in the context of Prime Minister Modi's much anticipated address to the diaspora in Nassau County, a New York City suburb, tomorrow, that is Sunday evening local time. How do you look at the emergence of the Indian American community as a voice to reckon with in the US domestic politics?
So two things, Ramesh, for your audience, since I was still in service when Prime Minister Modi came to power, I think you have to give full credit to this Prime Minister and this government for the kind of emphasis that they have laid on the Indian diaspora. I remember attending one of the earliest meetings with the Prime Minister when he said it doesn't matter what passports they have. At the end of the day, we should consider them as Indians, and their problems are our problems. And to the extent we can, we should try to resolve their problems. So I remember that this government takes diaspora very seriously. There is no visit by the Prime Minister without an interaction with the Indian community. So that has been the norm right from 2014 onwards. On your specific question about the Indian Americans and the Indian diaspora in the United States, I have to say that this is a very, very special Indian diaspora. I mean, we have a lot of Indian diaspora in the Gulf. We have a lot of Indian diaspora in the UK, and there are other countries. There is virtually no country in which you don't have an Indian diaspora these days. But for the Indian diaspora in the United States, what I have to say is the following. One, they are extremely successful. Even among all the expatriates of the United States, the median income of the Indian American is very, very high. So that's the first. The second thing I would say is there is a feeling in that community that they should give back to their country much more than in other communities. I think I see the spirit of philanthropy. They take a lot of pride in the kind of development and progress that has happened in India. Lastly, I would say that this is one community which made a solid contribution in making the India-US nuclear deal happen. As you have more and more Indian Americans in the American political spectrum, I think they have played a very important role in trying to be the bridge between America and India. So you are looking at a diaspora like no other when you look at the Indian diaspora in the United States.
Absolutely. And when one talks about the Indian American community or the diaspora in the US, Mr. Aneja, one can't help but also talk about one of the two contenders for the next US president, that is Indian American Kamala Harris. How do you look at the prospects of the two candidates, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, if I might ask you?
Ramesh, is neck and neck. I really can't say because I'm looking at the polls which are coming from the US. Very hard to predict. But to be very honest, Ramesh, let's be brutally honest here. You know, whether it is Rishi Sunak in the UK or it's going to be Kamala Harris over here, they are Americans first or they're British first.
Right.
So, you know, let us not get too emotionally carried away just because they happen to be of Indian origin. But I want to make one more point,
Sure.
Ramesh, very quickly. And that is that, you know, I completely agree with what Ambassador Mohan Kumar has said about the special USP of the Indian Americans. And that gives me hope that, you know, they have to rise perhaps to the next level. And I would like to see them really achieve the standards of what the Israeli lobby or the Jewish lobby does for their country in terms of political clout, in terms of economic clout, in terms of clout in the media, in terms of art and culture. I think that's this particular Indian diaspora gives me hope of that. But that's what we should be able to achieve. I think it's doable.
All right, fair enough. Do you want to hazard a guess, Ambassador Kumar, on the prospects of the two candidates in the US?
Oh, no, I agree with Mr. Taneja. It's absolutely neck and neck. I also agree with him that while we should take pride if Kamala Harris becomes the president, at the end of the day, we should understand that she's going to defend American interests and we will defend Indian interests. But I would take greater pride at the number of Indian origin people who are manning scientific technical institutions, the State Department. Those are the things where I think this can make a big difference for India.
Indeed.
So by and large, I think the Indian diaspora and the United States represent perhaps the best of the Indians who managed to leave India, who went to the US. And I think we should take pride in their success, which this government and this Prime Minister does.
Fair enough. I will leave it at that. But before we close, do stay on, Ambassador Kumar and Mr. Aneja. I want to pick up some more news coming the way of our viewers. Now, Prime Minister Modi, to recap the news for our viewers, who is on a 3-day visit to the US, has met US President Joe Biden some time ago. The meeting is taking place at the personal residence of President Biden. The Prime Minister will also hold bilateral meetings with the other Quad leaders on the margins of the Quad Summit in Wilmington, Delaware, as well as attend the Quad Summit and address a key UN meeting in New York City as well. And earlier, Prime Minister Modi arrived at the Philadelphia International Airport on Saturday on the first day of his 3-day visit to the United States. Philadelphia was the site of the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. Members of the Indian diaspora gathered at the Philadelphia International Airport. They gave a warm welcome to Prime Minister Modi on his arrival there. The Prime Minister interacted with the diaspora at the airport. Next, the Prime Minister will be attending a Quad Summit at Wilmington, the state of Delaware. Will also interact with the Australian and Japanese counterparts as well, along with President Biden, on pressing global issues such as the Indo-Pacific and the conflicts in Ukraine and West Asia. And early in the day, the PM arrived at Hotel Dupont in the heart of downtown Wilmington in Delaware. The diaspora there from different U.S. cities gathered at the hotel to welcome him. The Prime Minister met with members of the diaspora at the hotel as well as where they gathered to welcome him. Mr. Modi also witnessed performances by members of the Indian diaspora at the hotel. All right, may I take this moment to thank both my guests, Ambassador Mohan Kumar and Mr. Atul Aneja, for joining us and sharing your thoughts and insights with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated. And with that, it's a wrap on this special broadcast. You can get all the latest news and updates on the DD India mobile app. It's available on Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screen to download it. and let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also check out our website ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. All of us here in New Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India.